you doing, Mike?
Good, man. No complaints. Just, I was talking to Shaun. It's getting back into the football season swing of things, man. Different schedule. It's just a fire hose right now. So trying to manage it all and do a better job keeping my schedule than I usually do. So inevitably, I'm like 3 weeks, I'm going to wake up on a Thursday and have missed like 3 hits I'm supposed to do or some shit. It's how it always happens, and every year I tell myself I'm going to do better. I'm going to write this stuff down. I'm going to plug it into my phone, and every year I eventually forget something because I'm my own worst secretary. What about you, man? How you doing?
I'm all good. Like you said, the schedule completely flips this week. I get a couple days to relax a little bit because the Bills don't play till Monday. But having said that, we're all college football fans here, so my sleep schedule's been kind of off past 2 weeks.
Yeah, just a little bit. Nice, man.
Well, Mike, we appreciate you coming on. There's been only a couple guests that have joined Varsity House Podcast twice, and so we're adding you to that list. And it is a star-studded list. It's Coach Kelly and Kyle Hamilton. So those are the only two, and now we're adding you to that list. So.
Damn, I appreciate that. I am by far the poorest person on that list. So
you could probably combine all three of us, and we don't even come close.
No, exactly. So glad to be in that company. Wish I was their peer at the bank too, but we got time to work on that still, hopefully.
I feel you. So this is another episode of Varsity House Podcast. I'm your host, Shaun Crawford, co-host Carl Jones, and a special guest, Mike Golic Jr. Mike, appreciate you coming on.
Thanks for having me, fellas. It's nice to have football season back. We got through talking season. You guys being in the content business, it's a long, vast wasteland between the end of football season and the beginning of the next one. So congrats on making it.
Yeah, that's you look at content from a point of when basketball ends, when the NBA is over, till NFL training camp, that's my off period. I'm not big on baseball. Sorry. One day, hopefully, might get there, but that's my off period. But now, as you both know, NFL training camp start is full go, and then now, week 0, week 1 of college football, NFL week 1 is coming up this week. So very excited. But let's talk about what has taken place so far. Just takeaways from college football week 1. It was a very exciting week of football. Notre Dame did their thing the past 2 weeks, which we love over here. But let's touch on week 1 and just some of the key points and some of those key games that took place over the weekend. Carl, let's start with you.
Well, for me, we're going to touch on one of the subjects later on, so I'll leave that be. But from being from the Midwest, I got to talk about Ohio State. And I think one of the big key points that we were thinking about is the quarterback situation. Ryan Day didn't announce a starter until I believe the week of week 1. And then Kyle McCord, I believe he completed around 230 yards. And it wasn't like some amazing performance, right? Like, oh my gosh, Marvin Harrison Jr. is back. He has Ibuka on the outside. These litany of great receivers, Ryan Day calling the offense. And it was kind of a dud to be kind to a certain extent. Now, granted, week 1, first start, Big Ten on the road, all of that context. But just having said that, I understand that C.J. Stroud didn't have the greatest start either on the road when he was a freshman as well at Minnesota, but he still threw for 4 touchdowns. So I'm interested to see McCord's growth and how he gets better because I'm sure he will. We all know how you get better. I think the biggest growth, as we all know, comes from week 1 to week 2, and I'm sure that he'll be better the next time he's out.
Yeah, they're an interesting one, man. And they fall into that category of a lot of these upper echelon teams. You look at them, Georgia and Bama, all breaking in new quarterbacks this year, all losing guys that were, in 2 cases, top high-end first-round guys. Stetson Bennett, we look up, and now the guy's the backup in the Rams. So proof's in the pudding for that man. Van Wilder himself just keeps the gravy train going. But no, I think for all those teams, it was interesting looking at them, especially because I think each of those programs we kind of tend to give the benefit of the doubt to. And you look at all of them across the board, especially offensively, because that's where we were focused on the major change at. A little bit sloppy out of the gate. I think for Bama and Georgia both, you could see the signs there. And Jalen Milroe, we say sloppy by most of our standards. He becomes, I think, the first Alabama quarterback to pass for 3 touchdowns and rush for 2 in a game. So still making history in the midst of a game where they're trying to find themselves. There's new faces on all 3 offensive lines, too, at key spots. tackle for Ohio State and for I believe Alabama, tackle spots for Georgia as well. So everyone's kind of breaking some new stuff in, but with those programs, the pedigree ones, you kind of give them the benefit of the doubt. And like you said, Carl, week 1 to week 2 is when you expect them to go in and clean it up, because y'all know, like, you go into every season, and while you've got returning production, especially in college football, because you graduate guys, no team is ever the same year to year, and so you're always trying to plug some hole or adjust personnel somehow week to week to try and make it work.
For me, a game that I wanted to look at was Michigan. I expected Michigan to really come out the gate strong. I feel like they had a lot of, momentum. They had a lot of, things to play for with Coach Harbaugh being suspended. I thought they were going to come out physical, come out fast with a point to prove that you could suspend our coach, but we're here to play. We're going to do our thing. And I was kind of taken back and surprised by the first half. Honestly, also with the new clock, the clock doesn't stop on first downs. Especially you look at a team like Michigan, and for a person like me, I like to take the first half overs and first half spreads, things like that. I look at a team like Michigan who's going to run the ball. That hurts me. And so I look at that game, and I think they picked it up towards the end. Their defense started to play well, and they started to get it going. Obviously, working with the new head coach, there were going to be some challenges, but there was just some things, in that game that I thought they were going to maybe start a little bit faster. But again, like you both said, it's week 1. I thought the running game went well. Corum looked healthy, which is key for Michigan and their fan base. So I'm excited to see what they do this year. They did a little corny things to start the game with the Harbaugh jersey and the number 4 and the formation and everything like that. It was just a little bit corny, but hopefully they get over that and just focus on playing football.
Man, it really is amazing, because you look at that situation, and I think most of us understand the NCAA has been stepping in it all preseason long, between the player waivers that they've been denying, the cheeseburger suspension conversation around Harbaugh that was objectively lame, and even looking at what Michigan decided to do in giving their assistant coaches opportunities to be the head coach for these games. Like, especially for coaches of color, we know it's an uphill battle at times to get to these head coaching jobs. And so to have meaningful experience that you can use in the preparation, not only during that week, but running the meetings and running game day on Saturday, that's great stuff that's going to be helpful in the process of becoming a head coach at some point. To take that and then make us all forget about that because you want to go and act like Jim Harbaugh's dead before this game was wild. So, glad Jim Harbaugh is still with us, even if Michigan players decided to act like he wasn't.
Right. Now let's take a trip to the West Coast. None of us touched on teams, in the West Coast, and they had a great start to the season. I think it said for the first time in 40 years, the conference started 13-0, or any conference has started 13-0. And so, ironically, this is the year that they play great. This is the last year that is the Pac-12 that we know of. Kind of just touch on some teams that you saw that played very well, but also some teams that maybe have surprised you as well. Let's start with you, Mike.
Well, I'd say this. I don't know if there was a happier man in America in an honest moment than DJ Uiagalelei coming off this weekend. You watch the Clemson-Duke game on Monday night and see how that went versus another guy who went out and in his debut with Oregon State, threw for 3 touchdowns, rushed for a couple more, and just in general looked comfortable. We know with Jonathan Smith in that offense, they've always been heavy ground game, big play action pass crew. But if you go and watch Oregon State's tape, they've always lacked a quarterback that can push the ball into some of those NFL throw areas. And you saw the difference with DJ. It's what we've always known about him. It's what we've known since he made that trip to South Bend in 2020 when Trevor Lawrence was out that game is, man, the guy can hum the ball into some places few people walking this earth can do. But it hadn't worked at Clemson for a myriad reasons, and now he has a new home. And I get it with San Jose State. We watched USC beat up on them the week before on week 0, but to see the ball go through the basket like that, an Oregon State team that, listen, for them, lost a bunch on defense, guys to the portal, guys to graduation. If their offense can step up a little bit more, even than it did last year, he's got a veteran offensive line in front of him, Pac-12 freshman of the year in the backfield at running back. That's a really interesting team. One of the 5 Pac-12 teams that was ranked to start the season, and I think the lowest of the bunch. Will be very interesting to see if Oregon State and DJ can get far enough, fast enough in that marriage to challenge that upper crust of Washington, USC, Oregon and the like?
Yeah, for me, I enjoyed the fact that the teams that are ranked, the teams that we associate with being the better teams in the country, and specifically in the Pac-12, they all like left no doubt. And if you want to include Utah in that bunch, where they were down, I believe, 9 starters, down to QB3 against a Florida team, I know they are very, very down this year, a rough year for them. Having said that, they still have athletes all over them down that field. All of these teams looked impressive. It wasn't like they skated by. I mean, Oregon, are they still scoring right now? I don't know. They might have just scored while we've been talking. Washington taking down the Boise State team, which we always know has good pedigree over there. It was just great to see this. Obviously, USC back-to-back weeks. Caleb Williams is still doing Caleb Williams type things. I loved it. And as someone who doesn't get to watch the Pac-12 as attentively as I like because I'm on the East Coast, this week I was locked in. I mean, this is the last year, so you want to make sure that you're cherishing these moments, right? And they got a lot of good quarterback play over there. Michael Penix, we got Bo Nix. I mean, there's good quarterback play over there outside of the fact they're just good teams. So the Pac-12 did their thing, and they're going to have the entire country's attention from here on out.
Thank you for mentioning Utah, by the way. I feel like I got to constantly check myself. The 2-time reigning Pac-12 champion Utah Utes who come out here and just decide to grind everyone's bones into dust each and every week. And that was no exception this past week. So, yeah, totally with you on that. It's the deepest quarterback conference in America. I mean, I'm sure we'll touch on it at some point, but Shedeur Sanders now gets firmly added to that list after a record-setting performance in week 1, game 1 for Colorado.
Yeah, no, now let's talk about it. Colorado, a team that went 1-11 last year. And you talk about the performance that they had this past weekend. Shedeur Sanders setting records. They had multiple receivers over 100 yards. A running back that should be at Notre Dame, but he's at Colorado. Amazing play from everyone, on the offensive side of the ball, but also on the defensive side of the ball. It was a high-scoring, typical maybe Pac-12, Big 12 type of game. But I thought there was a lot of plays made. It was a physical game. I thought both sides of the ball, they obviously created turnovers, made the plays that they needed to make. But I want to ask this one question. Coming off of 1-11 season last year, a lot of expectations. Obviously, with Deion being the coach, there were some, doubters, naysayers on, the transfers that he brought in. They weren't going to be enough. That the trenches weren't big enough. They weren't strong enough yet. I want to ask, what is a successful season for Deion? Because he already matched the win total last year. So if he gets one more, is that a successful season? I know Deion, if you ask his team, the national championship is a goal. It is something that they're, striving for. But maybe as media and as a fan, because we're all on him. Our eyes are all on him now. So what is a successful season for Deion?
I mean, at this point, as someone who, listen, I had really guarded expectations coming into the season for all the reasons you mentioned. This is unprecedented roster churn, taking advantage of new rules in the transfer portal and all these things that are unique to the last couple of years. We just did not have a way to contextualize this. And so I looked and said, all right, you're bringing that many guys in. You're not going to get the same high-end talent, especially along the trenches and certainly depth of it, that you see in high-end Power 5 football. So that's all the things I was worried about. And maybe in an honest moment over the course of a long season, still a little bit worried about in certain matchups that they're going to have. But what Deion did with that turnover in mind in one offseason to have them as prepared, as focused going into that game, and to execute as clean as they did throughout that contest is already unprecedented, remarkable, deserving of a ton of praise and credit. So I think for them, I had them on the under win total for the season. I think that's out the window. I think realistically, a good goal and something that would be overwhelming success in year one. You got that Colorado team to bowl eligibility with that schedule. You're talking about a serious triumph, one of the better turnarounds we've seen in the last decade or so in a program. And I don't think that's hyperbole.
I was going to give a cop-out and just say consistent improvement. I'm not going to lie to you. Just putting a win total on this team with how just uncharted territory this is, it doesn't seem right. And I know, like we just touched on, the Pac-12 isn't some sweet conference anymore. They have a tough schedule, especially when you get to the meat of it, right? I believe you got USC, Oregon. They got some heavy hitters where it's going to be
got those back-to-back weeks. Dear God.
So it's not like this isn't some feel good, you guys can coast along and see what happens. No, they're going to play some real good teams who may be able to take advantage of some of like the weaknesses that we've alluded to earlier. But having said that, though, I think it's already a success because similar to Mike, Crawford and I talked off air before this. I too would have been taking the under. Like, there's just no precedence for what the hell happened over the past 5 to 6 months. Got to give a big shout out to Sean Lewis. He was my OC at Syracuse in 2016 and 17. Boy, you want to talk about a big reason why the operation looked so clean? He was a big reason why for that. And I mean, as long as they can continually improve and stay health free, because I think that's a big point in this. They don't have a lot of depth just based off the fact that they just literally brought in a new roster overnight. Stay injury free, consistently improve week in and week out, and Deion will get all the flowers and then some for the year he's had in 2023.
Yeah, Sean Lewis going to get all the head coaching opportunities this upcoming offseason too if they keep this up.
Oh yeah. He won't be there too long for sure. And I like to compare it to, now obviously very early, but something that James Franklin did at Vanderbilt. Coming into that program, changing it around for 2 seasons, and then being able to get an opportunity at a P5 Big Ten school like Penn State. Because it is Deion, I would hate for people to be like, oh, Deion doesn't deserve to be at a Big Ten, Power 5 or, another school like that, Michigan or USC or different schools like that. But if you look at it and you look what he's doing, taking a 1-11 team, beating a team that made the playoffs last year, and then we'll see what they do at the end of the year. But I do think like 2-3 years, successful years at this program, I think we could maybe start to look at him and be like, hey, it may be time for him to be at a perennial contender, university program like a Penn State, like a Michigan, like a Michigan State. That might be some trouble at Michigan State soon. So maybe like a Michigan State, but.
Thank God for Mike Norvell. They went out and took care of business in a big way, because I have a feeling if it had gotten sideways at all, Florida State would have been an interesting talking point coming off this weekend, just knowing the obvious connection with Deion there and that conversation that's always been there with Mike Norvell. But probably going to have to wait a while with that because Florida State looks legit. But I'm with you. If this continues to go well, I think most people always assume Deion's on loan to this program right now. It was a way for him to get into the Power 5. It was a job that afforded him that opportunity. And man, if you're a program that's thinking about this, you already saw before they ever hit the field. You got that proof of concept finally. Before he ever hit the field, it had Colorado in a place of national relevance that they had been wasting away at for quite some time. So he's going to bring that attention wherever he goes before you ever get out there and kick a ball off, which is impressive, and I'm sure goes a long way with an athletic director that's thinking about making that move.
I think Florida might be interesting too. A school a little bit, more north. But I think that could be a little bit interesting too. You see what they're going through at that program, and maybe in 2-3 years they might be looking at a new coach and familiar territory. That might be a great spot for him. But now let's travel all the way to the East Coast. Let's travel to a game that you called South Carolina, North Carolina. Just kind of give us some takeaways there. Me and Carl touched on it last week. Quarterback battle, great quarterback battle. I'm sure it was. You got Spencer Rattler, Drake May. Battle of the Carolinas and things like that, nice rivalry. Kind of just give your takeaway, being at the stadium and then, calling that game.
Yeah, I think first and foremost, both quarterbacks really delivered. I mean, Spencer Rattler, especially to put up the numbers that he did, considering he was under duress, it felt like every drop back in that game. North Carolina in 2022 had 17 sacks on the season. They had 9 in this game. It was like nothing I have seen in quite some time. Kamen Rucker, who's an outside linebacker for North Carolina, really good player. And you saw that in spurts in 2022, but he looked like Lawrence Taylor in this game. I think South Carolina's got some issues on the offensive line. They've got some injuries before the season even started that they're going to have to address there. And, personnel-wise for them, it's going to be interesting. They lost a couple of important guys to the portal this last year. But, they had some guys step up there. Xavier Legette, who's been a career special teams guy for them, was really big in this game on special teams and as a wide receiver. Juice Wells is their best wide receiver from last year, was a first-team All-SEC guy, was hurt, and ended up not playing the majority of this game. They kind of had him in a decoy role. But South Carolina, defense turned the ball over a couple times. Special teams recovered an onside kick. It was your typical Beamer ball game from them that kept them in it, but the offense has some serious questions. Dow Loggins, who was in the NFL forever, took over for Marcus Satterfield, who left and went to Nebraska this last year. So there's a big question mark on that offense, but really has nothing to do with the quarterback in my mind. There wasn't much more Spencer could do in the circumstances of that game. And on the other side for North Carolina, man, you got to feel like there's some hope if you're that team, because we all saw last year when they played, Notre Dame and other teams that were in the upper echelon, they had trouble protecting Drake May, and they had trouble stopping the run on the other side. And for them this game, they held South Carolina to like 0.4 yards a carry in this game on defense. And again, we know South Carolina might have some troubles, but improvement on that side. Some of that's personnel-wise. They got Tamari Fox back, who missed last year with the suspension. Like I said, they got a linebacker room. Cedric Gray was one of the best linebackers in the ACC last year in terms of just tackle volume guy. And then offensively, they did everything they did without their best wide receiver. Tez Walker's going through the NCAA waiver situation right now, which has been shameful in the way that they've dealt with that. For anyone that isn't familiar with that potentially, he started his career at an FCS school during the pandemic that had their season canceled, and so ended up transferring to Kent State, where he played there and performed really well. But while the NCAA is cracking down on that true one-time transfer rule here, trying to make it harder for guys to get those waivers and be two-time transfers, really on a technicality here. He never played at the FCS school because of the way they were impacted by the pandemic, and the fact that the hearings have taken this long cost him the first game. He's expected to be the best wide receiver on a North Carolina team that lost Josh Downs to the NFL this last year. And for Drake May to still go out and execute at a high level, he's 1B in the conversation with Caleb Williams for the best quarterback in football. But, they got great production out of British Brooks, a running back who missed all last year with injury too. So there's a lot to be encouraged by if you're North Carolina based on this result, knowing who you didn't have on the field. And for South Carolina, you're hoping to get healthier and give yourself a chance, but they're going to have to ask themselves some questions about how they want to go about making sure their quarterback is protected long enough to do the things he's physically capable of doing.
I have to touch on this point a little bit just because we see the sexy things that Caleb does on the West Coast. I mean, it doesn't take a untrained eye to know that Caleb Williams is really darn good at football. Having said that, though, you just alluded to it, and I tweeted Saturday night where if someone told me Drake May was their QB1, I wouldn't look at them crazy. You saw him for 60 minutes Saturday night. Just what do you see and what makes him so darn special?
So I said this in the game comparing the two quarterbacks here, because Spencer Rattler's another guy that's been, a guy we've known since he was a high school prospect and has all this ability. And you see them both throw the football. I said Spencer Rattler's firing a gun, Drake May's shooting a bow and arrow, where one's powerful, you can fit it into spots, but there's something about Drake May's ability to feather balls into the strangest windows and do it on the run and do it absorbing contact. He can hit you at every level. He's got deep ball touch. He can do it in the intermediate. He can do it on the run. And in this day and age especially, I think the feather in the cap for him and Caleb, the place I think they're most similar is they get you out of trouble. In modern football, with how spread out the games become, a lot of times, and with how multiple and complex defenses have become, we've seen that trickle down from NFL to college. I think college coordinators, I was talking with Cole Kublik, great analyst over at the SEC Net about this the other day. College defenses are getting a lot more sophisticated in the age we have with all these analysts on staff, of identifying protections on offense and using the structure of their blitzes to really attack those weaknesses. All that means you're going to have free hitters every now and then. And Drake May and Caleb Williams are the two best quarterbacks in college football at erasing the effect of that one free hitter. As a former O-lineman, man, a quarterback that can make that one guy miss if I messed up is a godsend. And one that can do it like Drake May and then be falling away, buying time, and still put the ball on the money to his receiver is huge at the next level, because you're getting drafted to bad teams that often aren't going to be able to protect you and aren't going to provide you with the outlets that would make a quarterback successful normally. So Drake's the real deal, man. There aren't enough good things to say about that dude. He showed it year one, breaking basically every single season record North Carolina had, and that's coming off the Sam Howell tenure, who's getting ready to start for the Commanders now. So he's a freak show, man.
Mike, I do want to touch on this before we move on. And something that, I push heavy with Varsity House, being a former player and now being in media, being in content, is encouraging, current players, former players to do the same thing. And so you're a former player from Notre Dame and now, got into the media space, but also calling games, something that, Carl may want to do in the future and things like that. Kind of touch on just, maybe some challenges calling a game, because we all know what it's like to play in a game, what it's like to watch a game on TV, watch it on film. But I'm sure it's a completely different, ball game when you have to call the game. So kind of just touch on just some challenges there that you have learned and that you have grown, throughout.
Yeah, I would say it is and it isn't as far as the similarities, because I always tell people it's the most like getting ready to play a game as a player in the way you prepare, because you got to have a ton of information prepared. Like, think about any game plan you were a part of is you go in with all this stuff that you've got ready game planned each week, all these plays you want to get to or coverages or defenses that you want to get to and show. And then a lot of what you end up calling is going to be based on the flow of the game. Down and distance, are you up in the game? Are you down? How does all that stuff go? So you prepare a lot and you don't always get to use it all. It's the same in broadcasting. Of the jobs that I've done in media and been fortunate to be a part of, you have the most preparation in this, and at times you'll use the least amount of that info because it's all based on the game. But the way you prepare is really similar. I get to sit here and watch tape every week. I get to look at what happened the week before. A lot of times I'll get to chat with coaches or players in the lead up to a lot of these games. And so you get to feel close to the game again. You get to feel like an expert in it again, because your job is to know those two teams like the back of your hand that week, to be able to walk up and call a game in front of those fan bases that know their team better than anybody and show them, hey, no. I not only do I know all the details that you're going to want to know about your team, but now my job as the analyst is to show you the game through my eyes, right? I'm going to take you through that broadcast, and I'm going to try and teach everybody something they might not have known going in about their own team. Eric Wood, who is a longtime NFL offensive lineman, once said that to me was his goal at every game, is I want to show you one thing about your own team that you might not have known, whether that was schematic, whether that was something in the background of a player. Somewhere I want to find that value add. And so that's the cool challenge. Is it's like watching a game with your friends, and maybe you're watching with a group of people that didn't play the game at the same level you did or didn't play the same position that you did, and you're chatting about the game. And when something happens, to be able to point out, well, this is actually the reason that interception happened, because the right guard had his eyes in the wrong spot when a blitz came, and now all of a sudden his guy's a free hitter on the quarterback, and that sped up the clock. Is those things that you gain, like as a player, by watching film, by seeing what they've already put on tape, by getting to dig in and find out what a team's tendencies are. So it to me is the most fun version of the job we do, because it is that game day atmosphere. You're in the stadium. It's a living, breathing thing. And the challenge is to try and have all that information you need to be prepared, but then also to be able to react on the fly using everything you've learned, really, again, the same as you would as a player.
Impressive. It definitely sounds like, something that we've all grown to, be accustomed to, studying the playbook, studying the notes, things like that, and then watching the film, and then being able to go out there and perform on the Saturday. And so kudos to you. I know it's challenging, but each and every week is something that you probably prepare for, probably look forward to. But staying in those same two states, Duke and Clemson just played most recently, and obviously for me, I thought that the game was going to be one-sided. I thought it was going to be Clemson, overtaking Duke, which I even throughout the game, I thought there was going to be a point that Clemson just said, okay, like, we're going to play Clemson football. We're going to dominate the trenches. We're going to put the ball in the air. We're going to run the ball. We're going to do what we want to do. We're going to play Clemson football. And it never happened. And so watching Duke on the other side, my former coach, Coach Elko, it was nice to see him get things going, get the Duke, Blue Devils rolling. And, you're seeing talent that you might not have seen at a Duke before. And you see them making plays on defense, making plays on offense, and even special teams. And so I wanted to ask a question like, is this a new beginning for Elko? I saw people tweeted Elko era, and then or is this just the fall off of Dabble more so? Carl, what are your thoughts?
I do want to give kudos before I give my thoughts on Clemson. I do want to give my kudos to Duke. Riley Leonard is a dude. I mean, we knew that in the offseason that he was a really darn good quarterback for Duke, and he showed it again, especially on that long touchdown run where he said, "Get up off me. I'm going to the crib." that was really fun to see. So shout out to Duke. Having said that, though, ever since that 2019 playoff season where they lost the Natty to the LSU, Clemson has just kind of slowly fell off in a way that like today doesn't really surprise me. I know that 2020 season where they lost to Duke, Ohio State in the pandemic year, some of the same athletes that they had weren't there, and then it progressively has gotten down year in and year out, and for two reasons. Dabo hasn't lied to us. He's told us up front the reasons why. The NIL thing, he talks about, he compared whatever joke you want to associate with that, and then also the transfer portal, which love it, hate it, like it. It's the name of the game today, and this is the way it's here to stay until we figure out some way to put it back in the bottle, which I don't know how we'll do that at this point. I think it says a lot about Clemson, especially because of the athletes. Like usually when Clemson's out there, you're like, man, they're going to out-athlete you. I never felt at any point that Duke was playing man coverage in the first quarter. Like what? Duke? Huh? So like, I don't want to take anything away from Duke. Great win. I upset Clemson once, Syracuse, my sophomore year, and I would hate for someone to be like, oh, y'all only did it because Kelly Bryant was quarterback or something. No, giving Duke their flowers. Having said that, though, man, Clemson, like, y'all just didn't look like the Clemson of old.
Yeah, I think you hit on it there because it can be two things at once, right? Duke won 9 games last year. Like, this is a football team trending in a positive direction. Mike Elko's a guy that we've known for a while, has got this kind of juice in him, and he's understood what this program needs, and he's gotten the benefit of, I always enjoy when I see Vanilla Vic start trending on Twitter for something. And God, they showed the Riley Leonard high school basketball highlights. I was like, it's that Shaq meme. I'm sorry, I was unaware of your game. I had no idea he had that in the holster when I saw the 360 windmill. So, again, there's a lot of good things to sell about Duke. You're absolutely right. Veterans up front on the defensive line, veteran quarterback, a lot of things to be excited about with that team. And I said going into the season, if you're an ACC team especially, and Duke is sneaking up on you this year, it's because you didn't do your homework. That they're there. They're a live dog in that conference right now and need to be taken very seriously. But you hit the nail on the head. Clemson no longer looked heads and tails athletically above them in the areas that we're used to, which are quarterback and wide receiver. Like, if you think of the defining characteristics of Clemson football, it's defensive front seven, quarterback, and wide receiver. And front seven wise on defense, still dudes over there. Like, Shaun, you were right. The reason in that game I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop was because you'd get to critical points and that Clemson defense would bow up and they would look bigger, faster, stronger, and they would go do their thing. And then eventually they got put in enough bad positions by the offense turning the ball over, by 2 block kicks, by 2 fumbles inside the 10 by that offense, uncharacteristic mistakes that if you're looking for the positive read on this, I don't think will be the MO of Clemson all year long. I will give Dabo Swinney enough credit to say this man's MacGyvered 10 wins out of every football season for as long as we can all remember, right? And in the last 2 years when they've had different issues at quarterback, when they've had lesser talent coming in at wide receiver, all those things that we know are true, he's found a way. And so I'm still not discounting that as a possibility. But the things that have been the calling card for this program that's also been a model of consistency that now finally lost Brent Venables last year over to Oklahoma, let Brandon Streeter go and brought in Garrett Riley this offseason, and are waiting to see the fruits of that offense bear, and waiting to see if Cade Klubnik, as highly ranked as he is going to join the ranks. I mean, going back to Taj Boyd, all we've known there is elite high-end quarterback play. And so when you wrap all those things together and, like you said, a resistance to some of the changes in college sports, I always had this year circled as, hey, we're going to learn a lot about Clemson because you got all these variables coming in at once right now. And week 1, game 1 in a standalone primetime game, who, buddy, are we going to overreact to a lot of that? But it's been a collection of things building to this moment, not necessarily just a one-off.
Yeah, no, I'm excited to watch the ACC this year. I think it's pretty, after week 1, obviously still very early, I would say Florida State has the leg up on the conference, and very well so. But I do think if you catch, a Duke team, if you catch a Clemson team, Syracuse, they put up some points in that week 1 against Colgate. I like them too. Notre Dame will be in the mix playing some ACC teams as well. But it'll be interesting to see, who comes out, of that conference, because right now we're all looking at, Florida State, I personally am looking at Florida State to dominate throughout the rest of the year. But you never know. Those conference games, as the season goes on, injuries like Carl talked about, you never know. A team like Duke, who's hungry, great coach by Coach Elko. Who knows? I saw a lot of people on Twitter today saying, Notre Dame, they have Ohio State, Duke, and USC in a 4-week stretch, and so that'll be a tough 4-week stretch. And I'm looking at it like, the day has come that we are talking about Duke being a tough matchup for Notre Dame, but that's where we are. And so that brings me to my next point. Obviously, it was a great weekend of football, ups and downs throughout, but the big game that I feel like that my entire feed was talking about was LSU and Florida State. And you want to talk about a game that a lot of turnovers, a lot of mistakes, but a ton of talent, a ton of plays made on both sides of the ball. And it was one of those you talk about where I kind of mentioned where I thought Clemson was going to come back and start to dominate. I just felt like LSU was never out of it. I felt like they always had a little bit. They had something. They got Malik Neighbors on the outside. Jaden Daniels could turn, any play into 40 yards. And so I thought they had it. You got Perkins on the opposite side of the ball. Didn't like the position that he was in, but I'll stay out of that one. But I just thought there was going to be a little bit more. And so I proposed a question on Twitter today, what really made me want to just get on a podcast and say, all personal feelings aside, for the Notre Dame fan base, for all the people who are Brian Kelly, haters, where would you rank Coach Kelly as a coach? And so or where would you rank him, out of the current coaches today? And so, because I look at that and me playing for Coach Kelly and things like that, I'm looking like, like everyone on Twitter or X was saying, I don't know what people call it nowadays, X, Twitter, whatever, but people were saying he doesn't win the big game. He doesn't win the big game. He doesn't prepare his team well in the first game. And we talk about Dion and we talk about how well he prepared his team for that first game to go out there and make plays, be disciplined, which I was very surprised of. They didn't make many mistakes at all. And to go out there and get the win and make the plays, where you look at Coach Kelly, they had some errors that they made, some self-imposed mistakes that they did on their side of the ball. And they just didn't seem like an LSU football team, that we're probably used to seeing. They weren't physical, maybe some players out of position, things like that. But I want to get your thoughts on where would you rank Coach Kelly out of current coaches today? Where would you rank him? I said around like 5 to 8, and I think you can make an argument for other coaches, but I had people responding top 25, it was wild. People were going crazy. So top 10, top 15. I just want to get your thoughts on, Coach Kelly, because we've all, watched him develop at Notre Dame and even before to now at LSU.
Yeah, well, I think you have it in the right range there, in like that 5 to 8 range. Like, I'd put him just on the outside of the national championship head coaches we think of, right? Kirby, Saban, Dabo thrown into that mix as well. He's going to be, I think, right in that range with guys like Lincoln Riley and others. Like, he's a really damn good coach. And I understand the big game thing. I think the stat I saw from ESPN Stats and Info was he's got he's like tied for the most double-digit losses as a top 5 team with Joe Paterno and Woody Hayes, who did it in like triple the amount of games. So we know it's been a part of it, but it's an imperfect sample size. There are some parts of that might have been, hey, Notre Dame and some of the circumstances there. And now this is Kelly's first, second year, I should say, of this at LSU, but he limped towards the end of last season. Georgia was probably going to pluck the wings off of anybody that they were facing, just the way that they were built the last couple of years. And so I still think all the things that he's done well as a coach are true about this program now. But you made the point about early in the season versus late. I think when you look at a lot of this matchup, one, going out and playing this matchup 2 years in a row against a non-conference team that's as highly ranked as Florida State is going to expose you potentially to this. They remade their entire secondary in a portal, going up against one of the most explosive offenses in college football from last year that only got better adding Keon Coleman on the other side. You've got the Harold Perkins move that might pay off for you at the end of the season. Maybe they'll tweak that. I don't know, because a lot of people have something to say, understandably, about Harold Perkins because he's so compelling, because he's such a great player. And then offensively, I think it's another one of those things. Florida State on defense on their front seven got a lot better and stepped up. That was the one question I had, was going to be about physicality on that side of the football all across the front seven, not just Jared Verse. And they went out there and held it down. Like LSU's defensive front seven against Florida State's was awesome to watch. Like Mekhi Wingo and those dudes, they got some dudes up front on that front seven for LSU's defense. But offensively, that was one of the big questions everyone asked when I was getting talked to by LSU reporters and stuff, was under Brian Kelly at Notre Dame, and with Harry Hiestand there as the O-line coach, O-line was the calling card. Were you going to have that same thing? So far, you don't have that same foundation up front to go along with a great mobile quarterback in Jaden Daniels, the skill players that you mentioned there. And I think that was where you saw some of the trouble start to pop up for them. And that'll be the question, is can that secondary come together through the course of a long season with what we know LSU's used to around there? And then offensively up front, can they provide enough there so that Jaden Daniels can start to explore more of the deep passing game that was kind of seen as that next step they needed to take from last season?
I didn't play for him, but I was a fan of his when he was at Cincinnati, being an Ohio kid, and I think he's won everywhere. I mean, you can date back to Grand Valley State. So, I mean, everywhere he's been, was it Grand Valley that he was at?
Yeah, Grand Valley.
Yeah, it was Grand Valley, Cincinnati. He's been a productive coach everywhere he's gone. Obviously, you guys know him much better than I do, but I mean, it's really hard to win a Natty. It's really, really hard, especially in college football, where a lot of it is just based off of recruiting and geographical advantages. From what I've seen from afar, obviously, Saban, Dabo, Kirby, even if you want to throw Harbaugh, like just what he's done over there at Michigan, turning that program around. They're in their own little stratosphere, different tiers, obviously, within that group. But, I mean, outside of that, man, he's won everywhere. Sure, not the big game. But, I mean, now we're plucking hairs here. Now who is really a good coach if we're going to take him down a lunge like that?
Yeah, I mean, being a consistent double-digit win team every year and then going to Atlanta in year one and beating Alabama would buy you grace at most places, but we also do understand part of this is the standard at LSU. The last three coaches there have won national championships. Right, wrong, or indifferent, and that's what Brian signed up for, right? He went there because he thought there was a higher ceiling at this job, and so that's going to be the expectation around there. I could have done without some of the insinuations about the players in the postgame and the things that came up there, but in general, I think a lot of this is he's one of the coaches that's going to elicit strong feelings from a lot of people. And this was a primetime game that got bad late. Remember, this was a 1-touchdown game with 11 minutes to go in the fourth quarter. So this was close for the vast majority of this game. And then some things popped loose at the end that made it, I think, seem a lot uglier than it was in totality.
And right, you talk about the double-digit win season, and another question popped up just throughout my day, and someone mentioned Notre Dame. If we were talking about another program that's not Notre Dame, Bama, Michigan, LSU, those type of programs, then we wouldn't be talking about the national championship. 10 wins of those type of seasons would be okay, and that got me to think. And being a player at Notre Dame, and I'm sure just being a player at any university, like your goal is to win the national championship. That's what you set out for. That's what you work for. But I have a question that if Notre Dame's last national championship was 1988, is it fair? I would say Michigan's in this as well. Their last championship was 1997. Is it fair to hold the coach or the team to that standard of we are fighting for a national championship every single year if the last one wasn't, since 1988?
I think to an extent, yeah. I mean, you hear the phrase all the time, you're a victim of your own success, but when you reset the floor to a certain place where you're in contention for that, you make the playoff on a couple occasions, eventually that's going to stop being good enough and everyone's going to continue to look upward. That's just how we're wired. And like you said, it's the goal of the sport at Notre Dame. You don't get a conference to win every year, except for that, pandemic season where we tried that with the ACC.
And we lost. I was so upset because we could have won the only one, but we didn't.
I promise, if my ACC friends already all kind of hate me because they feel like Notre Dame's the source of a lot of their problems. But man, if we had come in one and done and won the ACC championship that year, I would have acted so unusual. I would have gotten thrown out of group chats. I have no doubt in my mind. So yeah, I think yeah, that's understandable. But we can also acknowledge hey, there might be some things around there that have also made it more difficult in the modern age, have created some challenges there that are realistic, that aren't just making excuses. But at the end of the day, that's also the standard around that place. Like Brian Kelly passed Newt Rockne for wins around there, but he's not going to have a statue because they only put statues up of the guys that win natties. Like that's when you look around Notre Dame Stadium, all the coaches that have statues there are the guys that had the trophies to go along with it. And that's just the reality. And again, Brian knew that. That's why he, in his mind, that was why he made the decision to leave and go to LSU, because that's the one thing missing from his resume at this point.
Obviously, I didn't play for ND. I'll just say this entire conversation about standards has really taken off since the playoff was introduced, and I believe in 2014, or was I believe the first year of the playoff, where if you don't go to the playoff, win a playoff game, and win a natty, your season was a complete failure. And I know that you guys being around ND, obviously you guys don't have a conference championship, so you guys were already playing for that elite goal anyways. But, man, I just feel like I don't know how we can get that nice magic back, because I love the Rose Bowl as a kid, the Sugar Bowl, all that good type of stuff. I couldn't tell you who won the Rose Bowl last year. I really couldn't. So just I know that's a separate topic, but it kind of blends in with just the expectations and standards of every single university from here on out.
No. Yeah, no, definitely. And now let's get on this topic. Let's finish up with some positive Notre Dame talk. I think they've looked great the past two games, the past 2 weeks. Obviously going out to Ireland, which was a great experience. The crowd looked amazing. The team came out fast. I thought they prepared well against the triple option. I think it's always tough maybe, playing against the triple option week one or in their case, week 0, but first game, because you want to get in, your normal stuff. You want to get in your normal coverage, your normal offensive package and things like that. When you go best on best in 11 on 11, you want to get in your normal stuff. But you also know that you play Navy in your first game, so you got to mix in some triple options. So I was just maybe a little worried on maybe if they didn't practice it enough or something, something like that. But clearly, they did. They came out fast. They dominated. I love what Sam Hartman did. He made amazing throws. I love that we got maybe every running back on the roster involved in the game, every receiver on the roster involved in the game. And so I think right now the only thing that I'm waiting for is just to see the defense, have to step up to a challenge, because I didn't think, the caliber of players at Navy and that our offense a little different, obviously. And then now you play against, Tennessee State. It wasn't obviously the caliber that they'll face this weekend against NC State. So I think this week I'm looking forward to seeing the defense have to step up, seeing the DBs make some plays. So my guy Clarence Lewis got a pick 6 last weekend. So excited to see that. I had to shoot him a text after that one. He made a nice little juke move. I didn't know he had it in him. Made a nice little juke move, got to the end zone. That was dope. So I would say, first off, I love Sam Hartman. I love what he's doing. I think, all the hype that was around him when he came in from Wake Forest is starting to hold true. And I'm excited to see all the receivers get involved. We got some tight ends involved in this game. And then a running back. I think, as long as you talk about, Coach Kelly here and Coach Heastam, you talk about the Notre Dame culture, O-line, running game, it's still there. And you look at, Estime and the guys behind him, I'm excited to see what they do throughout the year. But Mike, touch on what you've seen so far, and then maybe what you're expecting to see this weekend against NC State.
Yeah, I think we've all talked about it relative to week 1 and Notre Dame, like you said, had the advantage of playing in week 0. But even in that game, clean football, right? You want to see a team come out. We talked about the preparation with Prime and company. But we saw teams with veteran coaches, with veteran teams that came back and still quite didn't look 100% in week 1. And for Notre Dame, listen, Sam Hartman is a veteran, so it gives them a leg up, but still a new team, not even the offensive coordinator he technically committed to, right? We had the change from Tommy Rees and then Jared Parker hired after that. So a lot of things that were swirling around, and they made it look seamless. Even if, Navy's probably going to struggle a bunch this year. Tennessee State is what it is. So this week, I'm excited to see, hey, how do you handle any adversity? Because they haven't had to show up with any adversity yet, offensively or defensively. I think Sam Hartman is 7 touchdowns and 8 drives or something like that. He's got as many touchdowns or more as he does in completion so far in the season. So what does it look like when Sam Hartman throws that first pick? What does it look like when the defense all of a sudden is getting gashed on a few drives and it turns into a bit more of a shootout for a lot of these young guys? Because you've been able to go deep in the bench. And I heard Pete Sampson talking about this the other day. It's going to be interesting to see who they trust when it actually gets interesting. And you're going up against a team that knows exactly who it is. Like Dave Doran's been there. He's one of the longer tenured head coaches in college football. Defensively, they had some big personnel losses in the linebacker room, opposite of Peyton Wilson there. But they still know exactly what they are on that side of the ball. And on the other side, quite frankly, it's an interesting test for Notre Dame because you've gone up against Brennan Armstrong before. You've gone up against Robert Anae as offensive coordinator before. You've gotten them together, and you've gotten them both separately after that. And so now the reunion there in this offense is going to be a really interesting combination because you've got another one of these quarterbacks, grown guy playing quarterback, been around this conference, played a lot of high-end ACC football, knows how to shoulder that load the same way Sam does. And so that matchup there of, all right, you're getting Power 5 bodies thrown at you now who are a lot more sure of their identity than the teams you've played so far. How do you respond if there's any adversity? I feel pretty good about it because, again, there's just not a lot that rattles Sam Hartman because of what he's been through, and we've seen the trickle-down effect to the rest of the roster. And I think especially you can draw the easiest through line to those young offensive skill players, but you guys know good quarterback makes life easy for everybody when you've got the confidence that you don't have to go out and go beyond your means every time. If you're the defense, you don't feel like, man, if you're down a score in this game, that might be an insurmountable hill unless we do something crazy. No, you get the ball back to 10, more often than not, good things are going to keep happening.
I'll keep mine brief. We all knew that Sam Hartman was a darn good quarterback just based on what he did at Wake. I think I played him. That was like 5 years ago. So the fact that he's still in college football is hilarious to me. Having said all that, though, dude can ball. And you can say what you want about the schedule, but they did what they were supposed to do. So like it is what it is. They dominated, and that's that. But Sam Hartman, I've always told Croft, like, I think one of the things with ND, especially in those big games, is that like playmaker at that position right there. And he's proven that he is that guy. Man, if some of the outside guys can continue to grow as the season goes on with that stout running game and up front that you guys have, he can make this a really, really dang fun season for the Fighting Irish for sure. Oh
yeah, I definitely have high expectations. At least the playoffs. We talk about the fan base. I'm one of them now. So 10 win. If we need to get to the playoffs, we got 10 last year. So, or what did we get? 9 last year. 9 last year. So I need 10 would be great, but I would love to get to the playoffs this year. I think the schedule and the inexperience, within our schedule, I think could help us out a ton too. So I'm very excited for this season. Mike, appreciate you coming on today, man. I shot you a text earlier today and you jumped on. So I appreciate your time always. I know you're a busy guy, got a workout coming up. So appreciate your time. And Carl, always, man, thanks for having you on as well. This is Varsity House Podcast. I'm your host, Shaun Crawford. Thanks for tuning in. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, Varsity House Podcast, and follow us on all our channels, Varsity House Podcast. Thank you.